Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grew up in a family of public defenders. I was the black sheep who decided to cross over to the dark side, as my father jokingly called it. But after seeing how many victims went without justice because their cases were deemed too small to matter, I knew I had to do something about it. That's how I ended up as a deputy prosecutor handling misdemeanor cases in our coastal county. Most days were filled with the usual: petty theft, minor assaults, drunk and disorderly conduct. But there was this one case that still makes me chuckle whenever I think about it. It happened during my third year on the job, right when I was starting to feel the burnout creeping in. It started with a simple theft case from our local beach community. We had this private beach area with several houses, pretty remote from the main road. You wouldn't end up there unless you were visiting someone or, well, up to no good. One morning I got a case file about a stolen boat motor. A neighbor had watched this guy just casually walk up to someone's property, take their boat motor, and load it into his truck. Thankfully, the neighbor had the presence of mind to note down the license plate number and call the police. The responding deputy caught up with the guy pretty quickly and found the motor in his truck. The thief even admitted to taking it. Since it was a non-violent offense, the deputy just issued him a notice to appear in court rather than arresting him. Standard procedure, really. I was having a rough morning drowning in paperwork when my phone rang. I answered with my usual office greeting. The entitled dad immediately launched into demands, telling me I needed to dismiss the charges against him right away. When I asked who was calling, he brushed off my question, saying I should know who he was, and insisted again that the boat motor thing needed to go away. I explained that I couldn't discuss his case without him identifying himself. He finally gave in and told me his name, but then spent the next 10 minutes yelling about how ridiculous the charges were. He tried to defend himself by claiming he was just beach combing. When I pointed out that a boat motor wasn't the same as finding seashells, he argued that if he could keep shells, he should be able to keep anything he finds. I attempted to explain property law to him, but he cut me off and demanded a different prosecutor, claiming I was biased against him. When I told him that he couldn't choose his prosecutor and tried to discuss a possible plea deal, he declared he'd see me in court and announced he'd represent himself because all lawyers were corrupt. After hanging up the phone, I made a note in his file, knowing this trial was going to be interesting. When the trial day came, I presented my witnesses: the neighbor who saw him steal the motor, the owner of the boat motor, and the arresting deputy. Everything was going smoothly until the entitled dad decided to present his defense. He chose to testify as his own witness. What happened next was something I'll never forget. He would physically move to one side of the witness chair to ask questions, then slide to the other side to answer them. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as he questioned himself about his relationship with seafood. From the answering side, he declared his hatred for seafood, mentioned his children's dislike of it too, though he noted his wife enjoyed salmon. Then from the questioning side, he asked if this hatred of seafood proved his innocence. He responded by questioning why he'd need a boat motor when he didn't even like fish. I looked over at the deputy beside me, who was watching with his mouth slightly open. He silently mouthed his disbelief at what we were witnessing, and I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing. The jury took just 15 minutes to return a guilty verdict. Given his bizarre behavior and complete lack of remorse, I pushed for more than the usual sentence. The judge agreed and gave him the maximum fine allowed, 100 hours of community service, and ordered him to take a property law class at the local community college. His community service was assigned to cleaning the public beaches. Every weekend for 3 months, he had to walk up and down the shore picking up trash, but he wasn't allowed to keep anything he found. I've been going to this local gym for about 3 years now. Started right after my divorce when I needed something to keep my mind occupied. The sauna became my favorite spot. 15 minutes of pure relaxation after a good workout. Just what I needed to reset my mind before heading to my job as a high school counselor. I'm pretty familiar with most of the regulars there. There's this one guy who's always trying to chat up everyone. Usually I manage to avoid him by timing my workouts differently, but yesterday things took an unexpected turn. I was in the sauna, enjoying my usual post-workout relaxation. There was another woman there too, and then he walked in. Now the sauna's not huge. It fits maybe 6 people comfortably. Right away he starts talking. No, scratch that. Yell talking. He started bragging about how he just closed on his new house, making sure to emphasize it cost $450,000. He claimed he got it for a steal and went on about how crazy the market was, boasting about his negotiation skills. He made sure to mention he was in sales and had been doing it for 15 years. The poor woman next to him could barely get a word in, only managing to mumble a few sounds of acknowledgement. He continued his monologue, going on about his backyard and how perfect it was for entertaining. He told her he was thinking of putting in a pool, and according to his real estate agent, it would add at least $50,000 to the value. The woman could only manage a weak yes in response. He kept going, making sure to emphasize how much money he makes and how he has to think about these investments. This went on for what felt like forever. The woman was clearly uncomfortable, shifting in her seat, probably trying to figure out how to leave without being rude. Finally, she made her escape by saying she needed to get ready for work. I thought, finally, some peace and quiet. But no, he immediately turned his attention to me, practically shouting to ask how I was doing. When I told him I was trying to relax, he got defensive. He accused me of telling him to shut up and complained that he was just asking how I was doing. He then accused me of simply not wanting to talk to him. I said nothing, hoping he'd get the hint. Instead, he started huffing and puffing like a child who'd been told they couldn't have candy. As he got up to leave, he turned back to me and called me a witch. When I warned him that he couldn't cuss at me and make me feel uncomfortable in the sauna, telling him I would report him, he tried to defend himself by denying that he had cursed at me. I wrapped my towel around me and went straight to the front desk. The staff was incredibly apologetic. They immediately sent a lifeguard to look for him, but they couldn't find him anywhere. I had to get ready for work, so I took a quick shower and was about to leave when the front desk lady stopped me to inform me that they still couldn't find him. She explained that he hadn't left the building and they suspected he was hiding somewhere in the pool area. She assured me they would review the security footage and file an incident report. I had to leave for work, but this morning I got a call from the gym manager. She told me that they had reviewed the security footage and not only caught his behavior in the sauna on camera, but also found footage of him hiding in the pool storage room for over an hour after the incident. She explained that given his aggressive behavior and attempt to evade staff, they had decided to terminate his membership permanently and ban him for life. The manager also mentioned they'd found multiple previous complaints about him making other members uncomfortable, but this was the first time someone had formally reported him. Apparently, he'd been getting away with this behavior for months because people were too uncomfortable to speak up. I just got back from the gym, had my workout, and enjoyed the most peaceful sauna session I've had in weeks. On my way out, 3 different women stopped me to say thank you. I suppose all it takes is one person standing up to make the environment better for everyone. My story begins about 6 months ago. I was living with my 3 kids at my ex's mother's house while we were looking for our own place. The plan was to find somewhere nearby so the kids could stay in their school. You see, my ex had always had anger issues. He'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a teenager, but he never properly dealt with it. Instead, he'd take his anger out on me. At first, it was just yelling, but it escalated to pushing and shoving. I tried to shield the kids from it, but you can only hide so much. One day, after a bad episode, I took the kids and went to stay at my mother's house. The kids were terrified. My youngest told me through tears that they were scared and didn't want to go back. The middle child agreed, mentioning how angry their dad would get. The oldest one asked if they could just stay at their grandmother's house instead. It broke my heart, but I knew they were right. When I told my ex the kids didn't want to see him, he lost it. He demanded to know what I meant about them not wanting to see him insisting they were his kids too. I tried explaining that they were scared and needed time, but he accused me of turning them against him. I had to tell him that this was their decision, not mine. After he calmed down, we agreed they could have nightly phone calls. The calls went well, and the kids seemed less afraid while talking to him on the phone. After a month, guilt started eating at me. Maybe I was being too harsh. When he asked to visit, I consulted the kids and my mother, and they agreed it might be okay since we'd all be there. The visit seemed to go fine. No outbursts, no problems. I was even considering suggesting regular visits. That was my mistake. 3 days after his visit, at 4 a.m., my mother's security camera started chiming. I was in her room when she checked the tablet and whispered my name in pure terror. There was my ex pacing on the porch with a gun, staring directly at the camera. I ran to get the kids into the bathroom and called emergency services. I quickly explained to the operator that my ex-husband was outside with a gun and that I had 3 kids with me, begging them to hurry. Then we heard a gunshot and screaming. The kids started crying, asking me what that sound was and what was happening. Thank God my mother's boyfriend had been working in the basement. He saw the camera feed on his phone, grabbed his own gun, and confronted my ex. He told my ex to leave, warning him that this wouldn't end well. My ex shouted back that we couldn't keep his kids from him. My mother's boyfriend gave him one final warning to leave. When my ex tried to turn off his gun safety, my mother's boyfriend shot him in the shoulder and slammed the door. The police arrived minutes later. When they arrested him, my ex kept shouting that this wasn't over and that they were his kids. The police officer told him he was under arrest for attempted breaking and entering and threatening with a deadly weapon. Turns out my ex had been planning this for days. The police found rope, duct tape, and extra ammunition in his car. He wasn't just coming to talk. He was planning something much worse. Now he's facing serious charges, and I've got a restraining order that covers me and the kids. His mother tried calling, saying we're being too harsh and that he just wanted to see his children. I blocked her number. I gathered the kids and assured them they were safe now, that he could never hurt us again. My oldest asked if we could stay with Grandma forever, and I promised them we weren't going anywhere. The court date is coming up and my lawyer says with the evidence we have, he's looking at significant prison time. Sometimes I wonder if I should have seen this coming sooner, but I'm just grateful we all made it out alive. My mother's boyfriend is our hero. I don't want to think about what might have happened if he hadn't been there that night. I've lived in my small town since I was born, and everyone knows everyone here. That's why it's pretty easy to spot trouble when it shows up. I'm currently finishing my senior year, and I've seen quite a bit of drama unfold in our community over the years, but nothing quite compares to the story of the prosecutor's son. I first noticed this kid when I started high school. He was a freshman when I was a sophomore, and right from the start, you could tell he was going to be trouble. Not the usual teenage rebellion kind of trouble. We're talking about someone who knew they could get away with anything and wasn't afraid to flaunt it. The kid's dad was our county prosecutor, and man, did that make a difference in how things played out whenever his son got into trouble. I remember the first time I witnessed this special treatment. The kid had deliberately broken several windows at the community center with rocks, and when the police showed up, all it took was one mention of his father's name, and they just left. No consequences, no nothing. I worked at that community center during summers, helping younger kids with sports activities, so seeing him get away with vandalism really got under my skin. But that was just the beginning. As time went on, his behavior got worse. He'd steal from local shops, vandalize cars in the school parking lot, and even harass elderly people at the park. Each time the same story played out. The police would show up, he'd mention his dad, and they'd walk away looking frustrated but helpless. What really started grinding my gears was when he began recruiting other kids to join in his adventures. He convinced them they were untouchable because they were with him. I saw good kids, kids I knew from my neighborhood, starting to act out because they thought they had immunity by association. The breaking point came during my senior year. I always walked home from school, but my best friend was waiting for his girlfriend who was in drama club that day. Here's how he described what happened. My friend told me he was sitting in his car when he saw the prosecutor's kid and his group hanging around the parking lot exit. They were blocking cars and throwing trash at anyone trying to leave. One of the senior students yelled at them to knock it off because some of them needed to get to work. The prosecutor's kid just mocked them, asking what they were going to do about it and if they were going to call the cops. My friend told me the kid was practically dancing around, encouraging his friends to throw pencils and other garbage at cars. Some seniors were getting really angry, but nobody wanted to risk getting in trouble for confronting a minor. Finally, the school resource officer came out. He told them that was enough and ordered them all to leave the area. The prosecutor's kid just laughed it off, reminding the officer about who his dad was and how they couldn't touch him. He said it with his usual smugness, knowing he was untouchable. His friends were laughing, probably thinking they were safe too. But the officer just walked away, pulled out his phone, and a few minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up to the scene. They arrested everyone except the prosecutor's kid. His friends got hauled off to the police station, and their parents had to come pick them up. The aftermath was beautiful. Within days, the kid went from being the cool rebel to eating lunch alone. Nobody wanted to hang out with someone who'd let them take the fall while he walked away scot-free. Even the kids who weren't involved that day started avoiding him like the plague. I graduated that year, but my younger sister kept me updated on what happened after. Apparently, the kid's attitude changed completely. With no one left to impress and no audience for his antics, he became just another face in the crowd. I learned that he actually started keeping his head down and staying out of trouble. But the cherry on top came from what my sister told me last month. Turns out the kid's dad lost his re-election for county prosecutor. Word got around about how he'd been using his position to keep his son from facing consequences, and people weren't too happy about it. The new prosecutor made it clear that no one was above the law, not even a colleague's kid. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.